Welcome to Soul Night Live number 88. Tonight, our guest is John Jorgenson. Hey, John, good evening.
Hey, now I can hear you. How
Okay,
are you?
excellent. Yeah, you're doing it right, man.
Okay.
So, hey,
I'm not an expert at Zoom, so you have to bear with me.
you got it. I mean, some folks sit here and they're like, it's like, and I'm like, just keep pushing buttons until it works,
Exactly.
Just,
Exactly.
well, thanks a million for dropping by today. I've been a fan of your work since, gosh, I guess the early 90s. I think I first saw you in an ad in one of my guitar magazines for, the sitting there with your silver telly. And it's like
Okay.
John
Yep.
Jorgenson of the Desert Rose Band. And I thought, okay, that's where I first remembered you. And then a few years later, I picked up Guitar World and they were talking about this group called the Hellecasters. And I was like, this is a really cool idea because I'd seen this kind of three guitars in harmony before, but it's always in kind of a rock or heavy metal thing, and that was getting pretty tired by the early 90s as far as I'm concerned. So it was
Yeah,
great to
yeah.
hear you guys go at it at more of a country meets bluegrass meets some gypsy jazz. It's all in there, and
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
just delightful blend. I mean, I just laughed the minute I put it on. It was just like, yes, this is the album I've been looking for. It was just a breath of
Uh,
fresh air. That was
Thank
Escape
you.
from Hollywood, that particular one. And
Okay.
then I went back and got Return of the Hellecasters shortly thereafter, and yeah, I was hooked.
Ah,
So
fantastic.
yeah, and
Well, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, you're fine.
Well, I was just going to say we were never really planned the Hellecasters to be a band. It was we were just going to play one show for fun because all of us at the time were playing with a lot of different singers and stuff like that. And we thought, okay, what if, instead of having like an 8-bar guitar solo, maybe per song, let's just make the guitars the singers,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of have it be like, somewhere between the three tenors and Three Dog Night, but
Okay.
with Telecasters.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and the idea was to make it really song oriented as opposed to, because people would expect blues jams and chicken picking, right?
Right.
And we're like, no, 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 no. Let's actually, because we liked, the Shadows and Dwayne Eddy and
I was
the
just saying, it really
Ventures and
owes more to surf than it does to, the typical chicken picking kind of stuff. Although there's a little on here and there.
yeah, yeah. You can't have Jerry Donahue and Will Ray and me with no chicken picking, but
Yeah.
um, it was just, I guess it was just the song, putting that into a song, having the song be the king.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's just it reminded me of like the great surf records from back in the day. There was a lot of that going on there. Like that tune, Inspector Gadget. That's such a cool one. I think that's the one that da 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 da. And I love the way
Yeah,
you guys. It's like a swing section, swing band playing a whole three-part horn kind of lick. It's what it made me think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it was definitely inspired by that, and um, we got, after our first album came out, we got a lot of recognition for the harmonies, basically, right?
Sure.
And so I thought, okay, let's just. I wrote that as like an opener,
Uh-huh.
like, okay, here it is, with no rhythm section, just the guitars, and here is that, that harmony thing, and we would be really I don't know how you say, anal, I guess, to have everybody, if if one was sliding, everybody slide. If one was bending, everybody bend. So all the articulations to be like identical.
Sure.
And so anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's like airtight once you do that. And it really has.
Do you know the guitar player Clint Strong?
It doesn't ring any bells. No.
He's kind of a jazzy player that played with Merle Haggard for a while,
Okay.
a Texas guy, and he was a buddy of mine at the time. I met him when Desert Rose Band played shows with Merle Haggard, and one time he says to me, "Hey, we both had a night off in the same hotel." He says, "Hey man, Merle wants to jam. You want to come to his room and jam?" I'm like, Yeah, I want to do that.
I'll be right up.
So we ended up, kind of jamming with him all night. Anyway, Clint called while we were rehearsing that song, and I didn't have a title for it yet. And he says, "Oh man, you got to call it Inspector Gadget." I'm like, "Okay, thank you."
Yeah, I think that's a good title for it. And is it my imagination, or do I hear a little bit of the Hall of the Mountain King in there too?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
oh yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love that.
definitely.
That's cool, man. It's like it's
I
got a,
I grew up with classical music, so all those melodies and stuff are in my mind.
my favorite part's about a minute and a half in when it just drops in and you just guys start trading solos and the groove really kicks in there. It's just like, man, it's just so awesome. So,
Thank you.
so how did you guys come up with the name, the Hellecasters? Was it just like you all were telly players anyway, and it just was a kind of a
Yeah, that was my idea. Um, the the band really the idea for the band really came almost more from Will Ray. He was producing an album at that time. There was a lot of country music coming out of California at that time, like Dwight Yoakam and the Desert Rose Band and bands like that. And so there was a compilation album called A Town South of Bakersfield, and we did a track for that album. And then Will was producing sort of I'd have to say like a low budget version of that same kind of idea. And they said, well, there's one track, you can do whatever you want. So he called all his guitar playing friends to come down and play. So there was 5 players on this track, and the other 2 were a good friend of ours named Jeff Ross and Billy Bremner, who is from the Pretenders and Rockpile. And so when it came time, Will thought it might be fun to do a gig with those, but it seemed like 5 guys was too many,
little
so
much.
it was just like, oh my God. So me and Jerry and Will decided to do it, and I was trying to think of what would be a name that would tell people what they're going to see, you know and I thought, okay, that's it, because it's got the like Telecasters from Hell, and it's not real serious, so they knew that there would be some humor. And you mentioned before, at that time there was so much like thrash, not thrash, it wasn't thrash.
So it's kind of heading into grunge by that point, I think.
Yeah, but this in the solo guitar world, or it was more like shred.
Oh, very much. And
There was a
that had
lot
been
of
going,
shred.
that had been a thing for 5 years at least by that point, maybe more. So it's
Yeah.
getting a little. It was time for kind of a fresh take on it.
Well, and as you remember, the shred, of course, a lot of technique, and players were really drawn to that technique, but it was very serious all the time.
It was, and I don't think the songwriting was particularly good. A lot of it was just a vehicle for that solo to arrive a minute and a half in, and then it's like,
Exactly.
here, look at what I could do. And
Yeah.
it just, I don't know, it just seemed a little half baked half the time. But a lot of
Well,
times it didn't matter as long as you had the chops. You would stick out. And people were going, "Oh,
exactly.
this song is lame." It's just like, "Oh my God, you can sweep pick like Ingve. Dude, we needed another
Well,
guy that could do that." We had
yeah.
enough of
Well,
those around here lately.
well, exactly. And so a lot of people said that was one of the things they really enjoyed about the Hellecasters was, like I mentioned before, songs, but also there was some humor, and it wasn't so serious and posy, and
Oh no.
with the wind blowing our hair and all that kind of stuff. It was
Musically,
just like,
there
it was more fun.
you could just kind of. It's almost like it looked like you guys were like trying to crack each other up while you're recording. Like, look at
Well,
this
definitely
crazy
that.
solo, top that. That kind of thing. And you can just kind
Well,
of hear the humor in there.
yeah, yeah. And Will especially is a very humorous kind of person, and um so I've like I said, we didn't plan on it to be a band. I think the second gig, we were just going to do one gig, and then everybody at the gig was like, oh, when are you guys playing again? We want to tell our friends, our guitar playing friends. I'm like, well, we're not, you know. And at that time, I was still in the Desert Rose band, and Jerry was still living like half time in England. So there wasn't that many chances where I was in town and he was in town, and we actually could do anything. So it anyway, our second gig, I think, Michael Nesmith came to see us, and he was starting a record label. And he's just quirky enough to get the idea,
Sure.
of the of the three tenors on Telecaster.
Musically, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, he's very, very progressive. I mean, this was, of course, the early 90s, right? And I'd been playing with Nesmith for a couple of years by that time. And he was the first person to try to explain and show me the internet.
Oh, wow.
He was way ahead of the curve. And he was, I think that was when it was still like CompuServe was one of the few servers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to show me, said, look, we can go into here and somebody has a camera on their aquarium in Ohio. I'm like, okay, why would I want to see?
Right.
I mean, I really didn't understand. And it took probably, God, I don't know, 3 or 4 years later. And then, I started understanding what he was all about.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So, how did you guys come up with the cover art for each one of those albums? It's like the first one had that kind of like a movie poster from some horror flick from the 50s.
Yeah. Well, and we
like
were,
the girl from Psycho on the cover.
Again, with the humor, it was our first album, but we decided to call it Return of the Hellecasters.
Yeah.
And to do like a cheesy horror film kind of thing. And the art director, we wanted it to look like our guitars were marching in, sort of like the in Fantasia, where the brooms are taking over.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorcerer's Apprentice, I guess it is. And the art director found this old movie poster with a girl screaming and whatever. Well, they wouldn't let us use the image for some reason. So he recreated it, and the girl screaming was Nesmith's girlfriend at the time.
Okay. Yeah, she got that Tippi Hedren, the Byrds look kind of going on there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so, we were kind of happy that it, they came out like it did. And then the second album, Escape from Hollywood, it was just the idea that, that's where we literally came from there. Our first gig was in North Hollywood at the Palomino, and that's where we got signed too. So now I was living in West Hollywood, Jerry was living in Hollywood, and Will was living in North Hollywood. So, and by that time we had been, I think we'd gone to England and maybe Norway, and which was beyond our wildest imagination that we would ever, get anywhere playing this instrumental guitar music.
Did it go over well over in Europe? Did they're pretty?
Oh yeah.
Usually musically, probably more open minded than America.
Strangely, yeah, France. We had a distributor in France, and in Norway, and in England. It did really well. So I just thought it would be, again, trying to be a little bit humorous and take all of those Hollywood postcards, that were kind of cheesy and cool, and paste them all up and look like we were kind of ripping through that, escaping.
Well, I was wondering if the title had anything to do with just kind of the musical climate at the time, like, we're getting away from this shreddy town and doing our own thing.
Well, no, I mean, that's a good take on it. It was more just because we got to take the music around the world, sure. That's really all it was. And to try to, still stay fun and, keep with the fun theme.
Now, is there any there isn't a lot of footage of you guys playing. I mean, I've seen the one from probably the first tour where you're like Rock Palace or one of those kind of European TV show things. Great,
Yep.
great footage. But I don't think I've ever seen anything from like Escape from Hollywood. Have you seen anything on the internet or?
Yeah, there, in fact, so that show is called Ohne Filter, which means raw, unfiltered, basically in German.
Okay.
And that's how they call live or whatever. So we did that, the one that you mentioned, and we had only, I think I don't know if we had done the second album by that time, probably not. And then we did that show again a few years later, thinking, maybe 97.
Okay.
And so that footage is really good too. And we didn't have our normal rhythm section for that first time. It was our first time performing with that bass player and drummer. Paul Burgess was the drummer, and he was from 10cc.
Yeah, I love 10cc.
And Alan Thompson was the bass player. He played with John Martin, and he's ended up playing with me ever since. I mean, we still play together. That was the first time we played together in 90, must have been 94 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you watch the other footage, we got to bring our drummer the next time, and there's some other stuff, a couple of TV shows and some, live, kind of bad live footage out there.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out. 'Cause that that pro shot stuff is just the best.
Yeah, there isn't, there's not much of that. Maybe just those two shows. But
Did you guys ever consider trying to put that out on a DVD, or is that kind of hard to get a hold of?
yeah, we did actually.
Oh,
That second one that I'm talking about
mhm.
it's called the Hellecasters Live Raw in Germany,
Okay.
and it was DVD.
I'll keep an eye out and see if I can get a hold of that because I'd love to have a copy. That'd be great.
I think you could probably find it on eBay.
Okay, I'll dig around. It's good to know. So when did you guys break the rule and start using Strats in the
Oh,
Hellecasters?
pretty.
And was that like a
Pretty.
big moment where it's like, I don't know.
Well, we actually used them on the first album. Um, it it wasn't like it wasn't like we couldn't or anything.
Well, it wasn't a hard and fast rule or anything.
No, because the Strat is a caster too, so
True. You're right. Okay.
and Jerry especially had gone back and forth his whole career between Tellys and Strats. So, and at that time I was working with G&L with Leo Fender,
Mm-hmm.
and he had asked me to try this new model that they were making at the time. It's called a Comanche, and it was like basically your shred guitar, but with G&L's kind of slant on it. The pickups were half coils that would humbug each other.
Mm-hmm.
They called them Z pickups, so like a P bass or something like that.
Are you talking about your sparkly brown one with the gold sparkle in it?
Well, that guitar was patterned after this G&L.
Okay.
The G&L that I had it sounded fantastic. It was a prototype. It's a guitar that you hear on Son Becomes Father. You hear it on Passion, on Return of the Hellecasters.
Mm-hmm.
It does this solo at the end of King Arthur's Dream. So whenever you hear whammy stuff, it's that G&L on the first couple albums,
Okay.
and it just I was playing that guitar quite a bit because I wanted to include that rock element into the Hellecasters too. Not
Sure.
to shun it. Just to let it be everything.
Oh, there's a couple moments, and the way it kind of pops up is just so cool. Like that boom, boom. I forget what song that is, but it's like it breaks into that, and
Yeah,
like headbanging for a half.
yeah.
There,
Mad for Mothra, I think, is on here.
Yeah, that's just like
yeah.
You sparingly, it's great.
Well, exactly. So that I used it. I used it on both those first two albums. Jerry probably played Strat on some stuff too, because that was kind of a signature sound of his as well. And then by the third album, we had left G&L, and we were all Fender endorsers.
Okay.
So I needed a Fender guitar to play that would do all the things that my G&L prototype did. So basically Leo Fender said I could keep that prototype. And it was an ugly, ugly guitar, no finish on it, no logo, no nothing. It's just like, it looked like you threw it together in your garage, but it was a great guitar. So I sent that up to Seymour Duncan, and I asked him to copy the pickups, but make the pickups the G&L has ceramic magnets, and my Fender version, it has Alnico magnets.
Right. Yeah.
So the clean sound of the Fender is a little, I'd say it wins a little over the G&L, but the distorted sound of the G&L might win a little bit
over the other one. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you use the brown sparkly Strat much these days?
A lot, actually. Yeah. That's when I still do, well, I don't do any shows now, but the Hellecasters basically stopped in 2000, and since then, I can't believe it, sort of 20 years ago, but when I would do solo shows, electric guitar shows, I would usually have that. It's actually called a Hellecaster model. Okay. And they kind of argued with me because it's a trademark thing. They didn't want to have anything but Stratocaster on that headstock, but I talked them into it. So I will use that guitar and then some sort of a Tele style. And I usually always have those two because the one can't do the stuff that the other can do.
That's really true. They each are their own worlds, and you want to dabble in both. I mean, it's they just
well, it's like certain songs. Like I feel like if I'm going to play back in Terra Firma, I need a fixed bridge. And if I'm going to play Son Becomes Father, I need a whammy. So
you're able to work some of that into your own sets down the road.
Yeah. I would definitely play, a lot of the songs that I wrote for the Hellecasters, and the ones that don't rely on the harmony as much.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's so many good ones.
And I would try to also include some Desert Rose Band sometimes, occasionally, not so much Elton John music, but when I'm doing gypsy jazz, I have a version of Elton's what's the song called? Oh, Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word.
Oh yeah.
And it's very French sounding song if you think about it, and it works very nice in gypsy jazz format. So, I like to try to. I know that when people come to see me, not all of them are going to be Hellecasters fans. Not all of them are going to be gypsy jazz fans. Not all are going to be Desert Rose Band fans. So I try to at least bring some elements of each other thing, to whatever I'm playing.
Yeah. Well, what I loved about the Hellecasters, one of many things, is just you each had very distinct styles that, you could tell who was who once you got to know you guys pretty easily.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you could kind of describe how the style of each guy and how it kind of differed and compared.
Well, if I was gonna tell someone that couldn't tell the three of us apart, I would say, okay, if it's a relatively clean sound with a lot of bending and a Celtic element, that's going to be Jerry.
Sure.
And if it's
kind of a holdover from his Fairport convention days and that kind of folk.
Exactly. And Jerry Rafferty and Joan Armatrading. And if it was kind of humorous and there'd be some wacky, kind of aggressive, but not distorted necessarily, then that would be Will. And he also, because of his ring slides, he would put little slides everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And am I right that he literally put them on both fingers, and sometimes he'd do this Doppler effect kind of thing going on.
Yeah. He would do like a 3-note hammer with his left hand, and then put that other ring like on the string above the bridge, so effectively moving the bridge forward.
Oh, I get it.
Right,
Right.
shortening the length of the string, which then makes the intervals that you're playing with your left hand wider, further apart. The whole thing gets higher, but they also get wider. So
Okay.
wacky,
I've never had
wacky.
anybody do that.
No, I don't. No.
Did you ever dabble with them, the rings and all that?
Well, no, and then if I would describe myself, uh, I would say, um, I would sort of cover the territory that those guys didn't cover. If it was jazzy
Hmm.
or rocky, as well as country, then or a six-string bass, I played that too. So that would be that'd be the way that I would describe. And we sort of, the one rule that we did make, um, was to not try to step in each other's territory. Because as a guitar player, immediately you hear somebody do something cool with double bending or with ring slides or whatever. Oh, I want to do that. You want to try it, right?
Sure.
But then you'd get three guys that all sound kind of a little bit the same,
Hmm.
you know?
Right. Yeah.
So, so since Will had a B string bender on his guitar and he did the slides, I would stay way away from that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't try to do so much, like Jerry would bend behind the nut and all this kind of stuff. And
Sure.
I wouldn't do that,
Now,
So
were you
that way
the
we would,
tapper of the bunch?
yeah, I would do tapping. Yeah. Cause they didn't do that.
I
So,
thought so.
and I would,
Mhm.
so that way we would each retain our individual styles and, it wouldn't get boring, hopefully,
Right.
to the listener.
So you brought more the rock element and the kind of gypsy jazz element. And
Yeah. Yeah. But I still very much of a country player too,
sure.
at that time,
Yeah.
so, and I think that's what made the harmony parts so good, is because we each, had a big dose of country in our playing,
Mhm.
and those particular techniques that are particular to the Telecaster,
Oh yeah. Well,
you know,
that kind of quasi pedal steel kind of stuff and things like
that and the attack, all the things from Danny Gatton and Roy Buchanan and James
sure.
Burton and Hank Garland and Jimmy Bryant and all of our predecessors.
Yeah.
Say, I
Yeah.
keep putting these things don't like to stay in my ears, so
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
know. They'll
I've
stay for
tried
a
those
while and
a
then
couple
they
times, and
slowly work their way out.
I've tried them, and it seems like they just fall out right when I need to hear something. So, but yeah, they're
Yeah,
handy when you can get them to work and stay put. So,
yeah. And I hope is the audio good? Is it the
yeah, it
audio
sounds great.
good for you?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good,
sounds good.
good.
Sounds real good. Um, Gosh, well, I want to talk a bit about how you got into gypsy jazz and talk a bit about Django and kind of curious, when you first heard him and, when the infatuation began. And then what steps did you take to start playing that
Yeah.
stuff?
Well, so I've been playing guitar probably 10, 12 years or so, or maybe longer before I ever heard of Django. You know, I was constantly discovering new players, Peter Green and Danny Gatton, Alan Holdsworth, and even at that time, Chet Atkins and Les Paul and Jimmy
Mhm.
Bryant and Jerry Reed, and there was just so much great
Now, would you
guitar playing.
say
Jeff Beck.
you were more into the country guys, or was the rock guys equally
Oh, well, see, yeah, when I was younger, it was Hendrix and Zeppelin and Humble Pie. Yes, it's a
I
big
love
influence. Jeff Beck, Richie Blackmore.
very cool.
It
Yeah.
Clapton, of course. As Beatles, Stones, Buffalo Springfield, Byrds, Mountain.
Did you
You
get
know,
into
all,
any of the fusion kind of Return to Forever, Mahavishnu, and all that kind of stuff?
not so much. I kind of like the first Return to Forever album.
Yeah, the ones where it's all acoustic and there's no guitar.
No, if this is the one with Bill
Oh,
Connors.
okay, yeah, we're Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. Yeah,
Yeah.
first
Yep.
electric one is what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think that's
And
really the best one in a way
I
for the electric stuff.
yeah, it's that one spoke to me. No offense to Dimiola, but his didn't. That went into a territory that I didn't relate to.
Yeah, well, I
It was
almost
too. I don't know. I just didn't like it.
didn't work
No,
for you. Now, Bill Connors is
no,
really underrated, and I think a lot of people don't even know who he is, but he's
they
fantastic.
don't.
And he kind of got better as he went on it. Eventually, he kind of almost sounded a bit like Holsworth. He kind of evolved into something quite different. You know,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I liked Holsworth, but I was never a huge Mahavishnu fan. Um, for anything sort of. I also grew up with a lot of jazz too. Like my dad um, put together a Stan Kenton clinic workshop for kids every summer.
oh, nice.
So
Okay.
I'd hear Stan Kenton every summer for a couple of weeks. So the jazz thing was already a thing in my mind, and sort of I don't know, the fusion to me, most of it didn't sound rocky enough for rock, and it didn't sound jazzy enough for
It was kind of
jazz.
like
So
straddling. It's
it's
like,
like, yeah,
not
yeah.
here nor there. I can see what you mean.
But I did really like Yes because they're kind of classical orchestral
I'm a
harmonies.
big prog rock fan. As a matter of fact, some of the first people I interviewed on this show were Yes members. I haven't chatted
Oh,
with
nice.
everybody, but I got to talk with Trevor Rabin and John Anderson and Rick Wakeman and Jeff Downs. And, they've had it's like a
Nice.
20 people that have been in that band at this point, you know.
I
And,
know. I know.
I
Well, I remember the first time I saw them, uh, I think I discovered them on, with Fragile. Of,
sure,
uh,
and it's a great place
and
to
then
start. I mean, if I was just to give somebody one album and say this is what Yes is about, I would give them that. You know.
I'd have to go between that and Close to the Edge. I don't know.
Yeah,
They're
well,
both,
I'd lay that there. I don't know if
both.
I want to fry their brain just yet, but it would be close. Because,
Yeah, as an intro.
like Heart of the Sunrise. Okay, I think you're ready for the Green album. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, I wanted to go see them. They toured, I think, with Black Sabbath in my area for that album,
Yeah.
and for some reason I couldn't go. So that the next time they came around, it was Close to the Edge, and so I was going to see them,
Oh yeah.
and not knowing that Bill Bruford was already gone.
Right.
So I was
Like who's this new guy?
but still, they were still fantastic.
I'm sure. Yeah. I
Still
mean,
incredible.
so much energy back in those days. And Steve Howe was such an atypical rock guy. He
Very
skipped
much.
all of the obvious stuff, all the blues influence, even on the lap steel. He's playing
Yeah.
slide, but he's not doing any of your bluesy cliches that most people learn right out the bat. He's more like George Harrison,
Yeah.
where he plays a beautiful
Yeah.
melody, but it isn't really
Line.
blues inflections. And that I love that. I love that. I kind of like to hear
Well,
slide in weird contexts that aren't normal.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, he was a huge influence on me, the way that he orchestrated his tones and parts, and having the acoustic instruments in there, and the 12 string and the sitar and the slide and the effects, and I thought that he was a course in orchestral guitar playing.
He
To
really
me.
was. And he likened himself to being more like some of the guitarists. You know who Roy Smeck was from the early 20s?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
where they played all the stringed instruments. It wasn't just about
Yeah.
6-string guitar. And
Yeah.
I love that. It's just very inspiring. He's just, it's just such a fountain of ideas and styles, and he did it so many different ways. He could play beautiful jazz stuff, he could play Chet Atkins style rags and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
Well, probably my
Nylon-
favorite thing from him is that extended solo in America.
oh, I love that's
He
almost
just
like
goes off.
it's almost like country prog, if there ever was such a thing. That tune
Yeah,
is it, because it's like 10 minutes long,
because you
and
hear
Well, it's like the
You hear his Chet Atkins influences in there for sure,
oh, I
but
love
they're
it.
coming out from such a aggressive, different, spectrum. It's just
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, it's just a tour de force for him, and it doesn't bear a lot of resemblance to the Simon and Garfunkel tune. I mean, the lyric and melody is there, but it's like I think eventually he got partial writing credit because most of that song is a Steve Howe thing. It isn't really, it has the lyric from Paul Simon, but everything else is pretty different.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think he got double or partial
Oh,
credit on some of the more recent live albums when they play that stuff. And I've only
well,
seen them do that
that's
one time.
surprising because Paul Simon, I would think, would be
I
really
think
tough to
Paul
get.
eventually just kind of said, well, 7 minutes of this isn't mine.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and
Uh,
I think that's good. I've only seen them do that once. I've seen them going on about 20 times over the years, but it's not a song they trot out very often, and
Too
it's like,
bad. It's one of the best ones,
yeah,
I
it's
think.
great. Well, they were a
It's
cover
so
band.
many great elements.
Early on, they were just a cover band, but they'd take every song and twist it and do their own thing, and you wouldn't even really realize it. It just sounded like a Yes song, even though it
Yeah,
was written by them. So, and that's the greatest one of them all, I think, of all the covers they.
I I agree. I like Every Little Thing
Yeah,
too.
that's a
That's
great one. Every Day's that Stephen Stills tune. That's another really cool cover they did back in
yeah,
the day.
yeah.
And yeah, love that. Yeah. So yeah, I could talk about them all day, man. They're just one of my favorites.
Well, you asked how I found Django,
Yeah.
and so so I was devouring everything that I could, about guitar in general. Um, but more, I came probably first more from a rock standpoint, and then sort of discovered some country stuff through seeing Rick Nelson actually and getting into the
Okay.
pedal steel,
Okay.
and then um, discovered bluegrass and Tony Rice and David Grisman
Hmm.
and that whole kind of world. And eventually, I got a job working at Disneyland in California, and they wanted a band that could play two styles of music, bluegrass and Dixieland.
Okay. And
And
what?
they really wanted someone that could play fiddle, bluegrass fiddle, and Dixieland trumpet.
Okay.
And I said, I don't think that exists, but I can play mandolin because I just started to learn how to play mandolin,
Hmm.
and I can play the clarinet, which I could play the clarinet. I was a classically trained clarinet player, but knew nothing about Dixieland and didn't even really like it.
Right.
So, but I needed a job. So
Mhm. And
started playing
what
these
year was
music
that?
and 1979.
Okay. Interesting.
And so there was a banjo player in the band, and he'd learned enough five-string banjo to play Foggy Mountain Breakdown and dueling banjos.
Hmm.
And he sounded like he was really good, but those are the only things he could play.
He's really good at those
But
two.
on four-string banjo, tenor and plectrum banjo, he was unbelievable and could play these show pieces by Harry Reeser, who was a huge star in the 20s and 30s, single note tenor banjo stuff, and he could do all of that fast chording on plectrum banjo. So he played three different tunings and three different styles on banjo,
Wow.
and it was impressive. Especially his right hand was like crazy impressive. And so I started figuring, okay, there must be some guitar players from the 20s and 30s that were showy too, right? And I found Eddie Lang and Dick McDonough and Carl Kress and a
Wow.
lot of guys that were great, but they were not showy. They weren't
Right.
that wow. And then I was reading articles, like interviews. Jeff Beck would mention Django, Clarence White would mention Django. These other people that I was, asking in this Dixieland world, they would, oh, Django Reinhardt, you got to hear Django Reinhardt.
Sure.
So finally, I found a record, vinyl of Django, and it just blew my mind because it was exactly what I was looking for. It was kick-ass, showy, flashy, with a tone that I'd never heard before, techniques that I never heard before. How could an acoustic guitar sound so exciting as that? It
Right.
was like Hendrix on an acoustic,
Sure.
just like it sounded like the guitar would explode at any second. So it was like immediately I had to try to learn, how to play this music, and I think I had an Epiphone archtop guitar, and I was trying to play it on that, which is such the wrong, it is sort of a jazz guitar, but it's just completely the wrong kind of
Yeah,
beast
can you explain
to
what it
play
is
that.
about those Selmer guitars that make them so good for gypsy jazz?
Well, the response is like super fast. Like an archtop guitar, you hit it, and then it sort of the body has to kind of develop the sound and then shoot it back out, right?
Right.
So it's great for chords and for full sounding things, but for single note, you can't even drive that top hard enough, fast enough to get sound to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The McAfee Selmer style guitars, they had a super thin top, and it was sort of an arched, pressed top. It wasn't carved. It was domed a little bit like a speaker cone, a little bit, and then a floating bridge, a long scale. The scale's even longer than a Fender, and so you could have light gauge strings, but they're still tight, and then you use a really heavy pick, and that drives that string, and that the notes just pop right out of it. And they're a little nasal and they're a little bright, but for a lead instrument, it just pops right out.
And they decay. It's not like one where you just let it ring for days. There's not a lot of that. It's kind of a pretty short
It
decay
it,
compared to
it can be, especially for rhythm.
Mhm.
You want it to be really short. For sustain, for lead, you have to work it. You got to really work it hard to get.
Now,
You have to shake it and work that string.
I know there's the one with the little hole. Is that for
Mm-hmm.
lead? And then the one with the kind of big oval hole, is that better for rhythm or?
That's kind of how they've developed over the years.
Mhm.
The oval hole, let's see, the D hole, as they call it, the larger one,
Mhm.
the big mouth D hole. That was the first model to come out. So that came out in 1932, and Django played that one first.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I can't tell the difference when he's playing an oval hole and when he's playing a D hole. I can't, you can try to look at pictures and figure out when the recording sessions were and maybe like that, but just listening, he sounds the same on whatever he plays.
Right.
But I think what happened was, with the D hole model is a 12 fret neck to the body. So you don't have as much access to the high register, even though it has a cutaway.
Right.
The oval hole, the small hole, is a 14 fret
Oh.
to the body. So you can access those higher notes easier. So I think he wanted that. And, he would get whatever the newest model is, right?
Sure.
So he got the newest model. The other guys got the hand me down other ones, and they played rhythm. So
Okay.
when you see the classic pictures, you see the rhythm players with the D hole models. And they are a little fatter too. They let a little more bass out because of that bigger sound hole and because
Mhm.
of the shorter neck.
Right.
So that's kind of how it has become. The
Mhm.
oval hole is the lead guitar, and the others are the rhythm.
I was wondering about that. That's very interesting. And pickup wise, I mean, I remember seeing pictures where it looks almost like a stethoscope that he had like on there. I mean, was it?
He
Oh,
tried it. They didn't have anything back in those days. I mean, you can see that he had a magnetic pickup that he tried in different places, because you can see different screw holes, and
mhm.
you can hear different sounds. This was in the 40s, after Charlie Christian came out.
Right.
Um, and there's one where you can see it almost looks like a contact mic, and he's playing with the Royal Air Force, or not the Royal Air Force. He's playing with an Air Force band, and they had the first piezos were throat mics that pilots used,
Okay.
because you could hear them over the motor sounds, right?
Okay.
So I'll bet you one of those guys in the Air Force went, "Oh, let's try this on the guitar,"
Okay. Yeah.
because you see something behind the bridge. It wouldn't be where a magnetic pickup can pick up anything.
No.
And so he tried everything. And there is his steamer pickup it looks like it's kind of the French answer to a Diarmid,
Okay.
you know, that people would add to their archtops.
Yeah.
And he just glued it, you know, he just screwed it onto the face with screws. And his last guitar, which he played quite a bit, is in a museum in Paris. You know, you could still see it's still got the screw holes on the face where he tried the different pickups and stuff.
Now, did he ever dabble with just electric guitars, like more like Charlie?
Like a solid body, or
Yeah, yeah. Did he live long enough to
well,
learn
I
how
don't know. He died in 1953,
Okay, so
so the Telly came out in 52.
yeah,
But when he came to tour with Duke Ellington in 1946, he didn't bring his guitar with him. He just expected that he would be met by adoring people at the docks with handing him guitars to play, right? Well, that didn't happen.
right.
No, it didn't happen. So he had to borrow, he went out and bought an electric Gibson, an amp at the time. And it was, I forget what model, it might be like an ES 300 or something like that. It was a full body, no cutaway, with one P90 on it.
Okay.
And he played that through an amp. So the recordings that you hear of him with Duke Ellington, it's not the classic sound that you expect to hear.
Right.
It is a little bit Charlie Christian sounding, a little distorted, a little, you know, and I imagine audiences might have been a little disappointed, you know, because that tone, his acoustic tone, is so recognizable and unusual.
Yeah.
And the records, I think, at least among musicians and guitar players, were treasured back then.
Sure.
You know, of Ian Grappelli, and you know, I mean, Charlie Christian even memorized Django's solos and would play them note for note. You know, sometimes.
Well, that's cool.
So, yeah.
Now he, now you know, he had some folks that are watching this might not be aware that Django had a bit of an issue with his hand. Now, was he just born like that, or did he get in like an accident that messed his fingers up? Because if I remember correctly, he only had two that really worked, and occasionally he could kind of take the side of some of the other ones and fret some things.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see, but let's see.
Yeah, that's good.
His hand was kind of like that. See these two fingers? They're stuck back like that.
Okay.
So he couldn't straighten them out, and he couldn't separate them. But he figured out, you know, he did most of his runs using these two fingers, but he could also put those on there and move them around for different chord shapes.
Okay.
And what happened was he was 18 and already a fantastic player. And he was living in a caravan outside of Paris and playing every night. At that time in Paris, the popular dance music was called musette. And it was usually an accordion, a banjo, and some kind of percussion. Okay. So he was playing with the top accordion player of the day. And he came home after work, and his wife had made celluloid flowers to sell to people to put on gravestones. So their whole wooden caravan was full of celluloid flowers. And apparently the story is he was getting ready for bed, putting his nightshirt on. He had a candle and a holder and was frightened by a mouse and moved quickly. And the wax dripped off onto these celluloid flowers. And just instantly the place was engulfed with flames.
Flames. Oh, Lord.
He got her out, and then he put a blanket around himself, holding it with this hand. So this was exposed to the flames. So this got burned and scarred, and one of his legs did too. So that's what happened. The tendons were all pulled back and scarred and pushed up. So when he was starting to recover, one of his family members brought him a guitar to think maybe it might help, him to exercise his fingers. And eventually he just relearned a whole new way of playing, basically using what he had. It's phenomenal.
Well, you know what, makes me think of is, if there's one chord that says gypsy jazz, it's the minor six. And it's very easy to play with just a couple fingers. And I was wondering if that was just out of necessity it's interesting because I can't imagine gypsy jazz without that chord, but I mean, he was probably using it anyway
Yeah.
for that.
Well, there's certain chord shapes that he would play up on the top of the guitar too.
Hmm.
When you think about it, the chord, it's also a minor six chord. If you fret the first three strings at the fifth fret, which would be with your middle finger, and then your fourth finger one fret behind,
Right.
That's also, it's really easy to play with two fingers, and you can move it all around. And
Sure you can.
so
You can play a whole 12-bar blues with that inversion without ever,
oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and that's kind
yep,
of how they do it,
yeah.
It's almost like you
Well,
think about that 5 chord on the next set of strings, but just kind of keep the bass. You know what I mean? Like I could be wrong, but I'm not like it's like a, I don't know, like a.
yeah,
Like that,
yeah,
right?
that's exactly right. There's so much you can do with that shape, because it can be a minor six. It can also be a 5 chord, like you just showed,
Hmm.
and it can also be a diminished chord.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. It's got that
you got a
tritone thing in
lot
there.
of,
Yeah, you
yeah,
got a lot of
you got
options. And scale wise, what works best, and what did Django favor?
um, he didn't play scales so much, probably because of his fingering.
Mhm.
I mean, if he did play a scale, he would have to slide. He would slide two notes, like that. But
Yeah.
he did more arpeggios,
Hmm.
and he would climb up with these two fingers up the fretboard. So he would do minor six arpeggios, diminished arpeggios, major six, major nine, flat nine. See, the thing is, with a diminished arpeggio, you get a flat nine,
Hmm.
you know?
Right.
And so the minor six arpeggio is the same as an A minor six arpeggio is the same as a D9 arpeggio,
Okay, that makes sense.
right?
Yeah.
So again, like with that shape, you can do a lot with 3 or 4 different chordal, what would I say, arpeggios,
Mhm.
and move those around. And yeah, he he just knew the neck so well, and not just notes, but colors, and where to get the right color for different notes. And I know a lot of Django's influence was Louis Armstrong,
Hmm.
and the way he would coax notes out of his horn.
Sure.
And I think, Django tried to do the same thing.
Did he use harmonics much?
Yeah, he used harmonics,
Yeah.
chordal harmonics,
Mhm.
and false harmonics. There's a recording of Nuage, one of his most famous recordings of his most famous songs, and he does false harmonic solo in it.
You'd be like where you're basically like picking it like with your right hand with like with the pick.
Not the pinched harmonic,
Okay.
false,
Oh,
like touching it 12 frets above,
right.
fingering with your left hand, and touching lightly 12 frets above with your right hand, and picking with your thumb.
I thought so. Yeah. I usually just take the pick and kind of nestle it and use the pick here with these two, and then you know, like a that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
That kind
yeah,
of stuff.
exactly.
I use those a lot.
So so he's doing that, improvising like that.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I know. Just so many colors and angles, just
Double stops, unison strings, uh, using open strings against fretted strings, on a higher, jumping back and forth, octaves, which you wouldn't think with his hand, but
right.
he could do the octaves. Different right hand techniques like the rest stroke, multiple downstrokes that sound like sweep picking. And it is like sweep picking, except for sweep picking is very smooth. And he would do it really articulated. So you really could hear the attack of each one of those notes. So, I mean, technically, he just advanced the whole world of guitar.
Absolutely. Like
by
there really
probably
isn't
50
anybody
years.
else. It's like, when you talk about gypsy jazz, he's the name, I mean, I'm sure there were other guys that came in his wake,
Not
but
in his wake, yeah, but
yeah, sure. But he didn't
not
have any
before him in
contemporary.
that style.
Yeah, he didn't really have any contemporary.
No, not really. I mean, um, no. I mean, there's a few that were maybe around the same time. Oscar Aleman was an Argentinian guitar player. Who's he doesn't sound like Django, but he's up there and at that same time period.
All right.
Um, but yeah, Django is really one of a
So,
kind, and
the big
you know,
ascending chromatic run, the
yes,
Django lick. Um,
sure,
did you stick with Yes when a couple years down the road, they did an album called Relayer?
yeah, yeah.
That lick is in the Gates of Delirium. Like,
Oh my God.
how
See, I
does
wouldn't have known. By the time I found Django, I probably wasn't listening
yeah.
to,
But that's
to
where
Gates
Steve,
of Delirium again. I need to go listen to it again.
it's like right in the middle
That's
of that
great.
da 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 da, the big war sequence, and it's like there's finally just yeah. Listen for it.
Oh,
It's like
fantastic. I
what's
didn't
yeah yeah
I
that's
didn't
like
realize that he was as big of a Django fan as that. That's
yeah
cool.
that's the only Django lick I've ever heard him do, but it was just like I know where you got that at. And it worked
Oh,
great in that
fantastic.
context because they're like that's like the battle sequence though. They're like war and peace put to music is what side one of Relayer was all about. This kind of
Yeah, I stayed with him until going for the one, I think.
okay. Well, it's
Uh,
that's
and
kind of when the wheels fell off in a lot of ways anyway. The
but I probably my listening of each album probably got a little bit less,
sure.
by after Topographic Oceans, really.
Did you like that
And
one?
that was I listened to side one and side two a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Side
There's
three.
still a lot of great music within those, lengthy pieces.
Oh, absolutely. Side one's probably my favorite 20-minute epic of theirs. I really love that. And side two's
Yeah.
got some
As far
side two has a lot of beautiful acoustic work and kind of like 12 string stuff in there. Then, it's like the most pastoral epic
yeah.
for Yes, I think. And then side three is like he's going crazy atonal stuff on the slide. But then at the end, he plays a beautiful nylon string classical piece, The Ancient. And that's probably the best part.
Yeah.
Before that, that's the most avant-garde as they ever got, and most people don't really dig that side very much. But
Well, yeah. I mean, they
the
kind of crawled up their own
hate album,
ass.
that has become the most fabled epic album in all of the annals of progressive rock, basically. And a lot of Yes fans are divided. A lot of them are like, you could trim it down and make one really good single disc. And the rest of us are like, oh man, just suck it up and listen to
Yeah.
you
I
know.
mean, it's you can see it coming, right? When you
Yeah.
look at their songs are getting longer and longer and longer,
All
you
right.
know. So I guess it was the natural progression, but I guess like anything, a little too much.
Yeah,
you
yeah, well,
know?
pretty much. I mean, I don't know what I would have thought if I would, I was a little young to buy it when it was new. But when I finally
Right.
got a hold of it, I'd have to say that it took a few years to really dig into it. It's almost like I had to get tired of the obvious choices, and then I was like, oh, I think I'm ready for this now. Relayer was
Yeah.
kind of like that too. They both just seemed a little weird initially. They weren't quite as accessible
Yeah.
as the Yes album or something like that.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
hindsight, but
Well, I think from Fragile on, I bought them as they came out. You know.
yeah,
So um, yeah.
well, I
I
can
mean,
get.
I didn't. I didn't want to lose them as one of my favorite bands. So I was sticking in there for as long
Yeah,
as I
they
could.
had a lot of great stuff all through the 70s. That last album they made, Tormato, was a weird affair,
Oh
but
yeah,
there's
I
nothing
had that too.
there's nothing
Yeah.
quite like that record. I mean, it's there's
No.
just it's just only Yes could have made it, even though it doesn't sound anything like Close to the
True.
Edge. You know,
True.
it's a,
And one would never think that they would come back, in the way that they did.
yeah,
You know.
I'm a Trevor Rabin fan too. He was
Oh yeah.
quite
Yeah.
he had a
I
hell
think.
of a right hand. He was very McLaughlin inspired when it came to he did this steel string acoustic number every night called Solly's Beard, where it's just, amazing right hand picking on a steel string. And, you know,
I did see them when they sort of had their double lineup,
yeah, the Union tour back in '91. Yeah, I saw that. That was,
and it was odd. I mean, I think Trevor Abraham is super talented, and I'm a really fan of a lot of the stuff that he did and does, and huge Steve Howe fan. But I thought you couldn't have put two worse guitar players together. To me, they each showed the weakness of the other one in not a good way. It wasn't like a supportive way, and it wasn't like they were battling.
no, they weren't,
But
they weren't,
but it was like, Howe is so unique with his style, that angular odd tone and everything. And then when I would hear Trevor's style right after it, it would seem so generic and like, okay, like every other kind of metal player, right?
pretty much.
And then
he was doing all this flashy, tappy, silly shit. Well,
yeah,
it's like,
and
they did Yours Is No Disgrace, and Steve played his usual wonderful solo that you're used to. And then Trevor gets a go after that. And it's kind
yeah,
of like a fart in church after what we had just heard from
exactly.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
And Trevor can be
And
very
then
technical. That wasn't a good example.
well, and on the other hand, he was very fluid and smooth,
Oh, yeah.
and it would make Steve Howe sound kind of jagged and rough
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
smooth.
In
So I was
comparison.
like, wow, how can two great players like this, just and it was just odd.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't totally, things were much more chummy over in the keyboard department. I'll put it that way.
Sure, yeah,
Guitar wise, they were kind of at odds, So kind of like Steve would be like, no, don't play that part. That's my part. Let's go find a part for you to play. That was kind of the situation.
I think that would be, yeah, I think that would be a rough,
Oh, it would be.
that
So that was,
that'd be rough for both of them.
yeah, pretty much. So it was an odd time, but I'm glad it happened, and people have talked for many years.
Yeah, I was glad to see it.
Like,
that was my only time to see Bill Bruford with them.
Me too.
So
Me too. And I've loved so much everything he did. The stuff he did with King Crimson and his own fusion band with Holsworth. That was like killer.
Yeah.
Love that stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely. So
Definitely.
Django wise, what are his most best known pieces, and which ones would you suggest for somebody that's just starting out? Like, what would you approach first?
Well, the joke is that the first 30 years is the hardest of learning that style.
I'm sure. Yeah.
and if you've grown up learning more traditional style of guitar playing, boy, everything about playing gypsy jazz is different. Everything, the way that you want the notes to speak, the chord shapes, the right hand, the pick, the instrument, the strings, everything is different. So you kind of have to it's like learning a new language. You kind of have to throw away your old ideas, because if you default to a blues lick, it's just going to be so lame,
Sure.
So his most famous ones, of course, are minor swing.
Sure.
The problem with minor swing, though, is it doesn't really have a melody. It has an intro riff and an outro riff, and then it has solos.
All right.
And the solos are hard,
So it's like, it seems
But
simple on the surface, but once you start digging into those solos, it's as hard as anything else.
oh, it's just hard. Nuage, of course, is another one of his most famous ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's got a beautiful chord progression.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice too. But to start out with, maybe what would be kind of, maybe Viper's Dream might be a good one to start with.
Whose dream?
That one's Viper's Dream.
Viper's Dream.
Viper.
Okay.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. That's not super hard.
Okay.
Thinking some of the more mid-tempo ones, Honeysuckle Rose, maybe.
Sure.
I mean, any of his tunes that you're going to try to play as solos are hard. There's none of them that are easy.
But you
You know.
need to learn the solos to understand the language. It's not
Well, I
like
think so.
start
Yeah.
playing that way. It's like you kind of need to kind of get under the hood and see what the part, how it's put together. And that's probably the best way to do
Yeah,
it. It's
you
just
do
to learn.
because those yeah, it's like a language, and those are the phrases of the language.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't know the phrases, you're not going to be able to do it. And I think, people try to maybe learn it just a little bit and learn the song and then try to just jam over it.
Right.
But it's like being in a debate in Japan and speaking English.
Right.
It's just you're not going to win with that.
Right. You might get a couple words through, but the rest is not going to be understood.
Yeah, your audience is just going to be like,
out of context, and none of your rock licks are going to save you.
They just won't. Yeah, because the strings are too hard to bend. And
What about country licks?
Yeah.
Would that get you a little closer to what Django's doing, or is it still?
Not really. That was why the style was so appealing to me, because it was so different than anything I'd ever heard. Even straight ahead jazz, it's really not even like that.
Right.
The closest thing it is to like Louis Armstrong's playing the trumpet.
Sure.
In late 20s, early 30s,
The Hot
New Orleans
Five,
jazz.
all those records you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that might be a good way to start, is take some of those and play them on the guitar, because even though Louis was amazing, he wasn't that fast.
Right.
So the licks aren't super fast. So you can start to get the phrasing and understand it, without being too hard.
Move on to change.
That's one thing I always say. I'm so glad that I grew up in the era that I did, because there was popular guitar songs that were not that hard to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Creedence stuff and Santana stuff and Buffalo Springfield, and Hendrix was kind of hard to play right,
Sure.
but there was enough guitar songs where you could actually play them and be in a band, and you didn't have to be a virtuoso.
Sure. Grow into that later. So I was wondering how you hooked up with Elton John. Last week I had David Payton on the show, and I know you guys
I love David Payton.
were in lineup together for a number of years.
Yes.
What years was that? I want to say 90s, because it was after I first heard about you in the Hellecasters. And the next thing I know, I see an ad. You and Davy Johnstone did an album on a mini disc player called Crop Circle, which is really cool stuff.
Exactly.
Folks, check it out. It's a good album. And
thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's when I was he's playing with Elton now. Okay, well, good for John. I'm sure that's a great gig to have.
Oh, it was a blast, and Davey was really fun to play with. He's such a great player. Well, Elton had come to see the Desert Rose Band. He was a fan of the Desert Rose Band.
Very cool.
And he came to see us at a show at the Roxy in LA.
Yeah. And would you describe the Desert Rose Band just in brief? You guys are a country band, but just what I was watching recently, you're going at it from a different angle, almost like,
definitely different.
Melded with country. Not really, kind of.
It was, the band was my idea. And the singers in the band, which were Herb Peterson and Chris Hillman and myself, and Bill Bryson too at starting, we had an acoustic quartet. And we were all steeped in traditional bluegrass and that type of harmony singing. Mm-hmm. But I also loved British Invasion rock guitar sounds, and of course, Chris Hillman's history with the Byrds. And so my idea was to put all those elements together, and almost like if the Pretenders met Bill Monroe. And and we were from California. We had a lot of California influence, like the early Buck Owens, Merle Haggard kind of thing.
Sure.
And so with J.D. Maness on the pedal steel, who came from Buck Owens' band, and Steve Duncan on drums, who came from Rick Nelson's band, it was like this country rock for a lack of, but it wasn't the typical kind of, Eagles, Firefall kind of country rock. The rock came more from the British invasion kind of sounds, and the harmonies came more from bluegrass.
Mm-hmm.
So we were extremely skilled. Each person on their instrument was incredibly skilled and had great tone, great musical. The singers were really good, so we had good harmonies. Chris Hillman was writing songs that were not typical country songs, but they fit into that market. Okay, I think my AirPods just says 10%. So
Okay.
if I go silent, then we'll know why. But the Desert Rose Band, we started around in 1985, 86. We had a dozen top 10 singles, 5 number one. We came from a really different perspective. We were from California. We weren't part of the Nashville machinery. And it was a time in country music before hats took over, before the Garth Brooks,
Right.
Alan Jackson, Clint Black time,
early night.
and after the urban cowboy thing. So it was, 87 to 91. There was a time when you'd hear Steve Earle, and Lyle Lovett and Nancy Griffith and Katie Lang.
Sure.
It was different. Dwight Yoakam.
It was a fertile time.
It was a really good time for country music, I think. For what I like. I like the Louvin brothers and of course Emmylou Harris and even the Linda Ronstadt kind of country rock that she was doing. And
sure.
Anyway, so Elton came to see us at a gig at the Roxy in LA, and I met him afterwards, and he said, "Brilliant guitar playing, fucking brilliant." Wow, you're Elton John. And he invited me to come see his next show when he was playing at the Universal Amphitheater. So I did, and that's where I met Davey, and we became friends, and we would meet up on the road over the years. And then this was in the days before email or cell phones, so it wasn't as easy to keep in touch with people. And eventually I lost touch with them and kind of forgot about it. And then out of the blue in 94, I guess, I got a call from Elton saying, I've just done this album. It's a heavy guitar album. I need another guitarist that can do a lot of harmony vocals, and you were the first person we thought of. And
okay.
I said, awesome. What are you asking? He said, 18-month world tour. I thought, oh my God. Because at that time, the Hellecasters first album had just come out and was doing really well.
Uh-huh.
We'd won album of the year from Guitar Player magazine, and we were starting our second album, Escape from Hollywood, was just about to come out. So I kind of didn't want to throw everything away,
Sure.
even though this was an incredible opportunity. But after about a week of kind of going back and forth, I finally decided I really wanted to do that. So I called him up, and an 18-month world tour turned into 6 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so during the first part of that, we were on a tour of North America and Canada, America and Canada, and our bass player got hit by a truck. A drunk driver hit him on our day off.
That's awful.
And so I filled in on bass actually for a couple shows, and then David Payton came and played with us for the rest of the year. And the bass player
he had been with Elton back in the 80s.
The first time that I went to see Elton after meeting him, David was playing bass,
Okay.
in 1987 or 88.
Yeah.
And Charlie Morgan was playing drums, and still Davey Johnston on guitar, Fred Mandel on keyboards. And so I didn't know Davey Payton at that time, but I'd seen him. I knew how great he was.
And you heard that song.
He was able to get.
Yeah, you heard his big hit back in the 70s. Who could escape?
Oh yeah.
One of the biggest
Pilot.
in the 70s. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he came and kind of, Elton, it was actually kind of amazing. Elton loved my bass playing, but he didn't want to lose the other instruments I was playing at the time, which was pedal steel and saxophone and, the second guitars and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Davey Payton came in and toured with us for the rest of the year. and gave Bob Birch time to heal up, and he
That's
was able to
right.
come.
And Bob, that kind of plagued the rest of his life, unfortunately, didn't it? It was
Yeah.
like he dealt with.
Well, he broke both of his legs and fractured his back.
Oh God.
So he was never out of pain from
Out of
that time
pain. Yeah, he
forward.
just couldn't take it after a while. Poor guy.
After a while, it just got too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a shame.
So it is.
You know, there's a
And
really cool instructional video out there where Bob interviews Chris Squire. Look it up sometime.
I
He's
need to see
like,
that. Okay.
you know, you could tell he's a huge Chris Squire fan. You know, so he's,
Yes.
you know,
Oh, that's
I'm speaking with Chris Squire today, and
cool.
it's like Chris is like, yeah, you know, I brought some basses. You know, let's look at them. Oh, this one's kind of green and has my initials, you know. So it's not really, it doesn't impart a lot of information about Chris's style, but it's a fun chat between the two of them, kind of looking at it.
Nice.
So yeah, look that up. Sorry to interrupt.
That's no, that's cool. Well, I was just going to say about Elton. I mean, it's been a really interesting relationship with him because I guess I liken it to the mafia. It's like if you don't do anything wrong, and you know once you're part of the family, you're always part of the family.
Sure.
So I've been called in back to service a number of times over the years for various things. A lot of times to relieve Davy Johnston if he had a health issue or family issue or something
Sure.
like that. Just it was 2 summers ago in 2019. I was on, I did a European leg of the Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour.
Oh, nice.
So that was kind of nice. And yeah, different things over the years. So I'm probably not done yet.
Well, okay. Well, maybe
we'll
I'll catch
see.
you out there sometime. That would be wonderful. Yeah, Davy Johnstone has such a cool style. You know, there's so many, you know, you don't think of Elton John music as guitar rock, but when you start digging in, there's a lot of really cool guitar playing on those records. I mean, stuff like the Bitch
Yeah, if you
Back
take,
immediately comes to mind, you know. That's
oh yeah,
like Keith Richards.
Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's such a fun one.
Sat-
And I would think Love Lies Bleeding is one of the big epic kind of, you know, guitar moments of the
totally.
night, you know.
It's great. Yeah, that's so fun to play. It was fun to play being the only guitarist, but it was even more fun to play when Davey and I would play it together because then we could do all the harmonies and yeah, that was.
Yeah,
And do I see a double neck Gibson back there or a double neck
you do.
Epiphone?
It's an Epiphone.
Is that
Yeah.
well? Davey would play. He would use a double neck on "I'm Still Standing."
Okay.
And so this last tour, I decided to, to get myself a double neck too, and I found an off-brand one that I just I put amazing pickups in it and adjusted the nut and all this kind of stuff. It ended up being a great guitar,
Yeah.
but it was fun to play. I ended up using it on 3 or 4 songs just because I liked the sound of it so much.
Bring your chiropractor on the road to
it wasn't that bad if you
Wasn't
didn't,
that bad? That's
just if you didn't do too many in
it's
a row.
mostly just neck heavy.
And one of the times I have to tell you is so funny. So I'm Still Standing. Most of the song's in B flat minor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I had this whole guitar, the whole double neck, tuned up a half step.
Okay,
so that I could play it in A minor.
Things, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of his songs are in piano keys,
Sure.
E flat, F, and stuff like that. So I found, wow, this guitar is good for Someone Saved My Life Tonight, and so I was, but during I'm Still Standing, you got to do the chords on the 12-string neck and sing the harmonies, right?
Right.
And then when it's time for the solo, switch necks, turn on the distortion, and walk out front and switch necks and play the solo, right? So I'm singing, I do the thing, I'm getting ready, here's the switch, and then I hit the distortion, I walk out, and I'm like, fuck, I don't hear anything. And I'm looking at it. I've switched it to the 6-string neck, but I'm not playing the 6-string neck.
Oh, okay.
I'm playing the 12-string
neck.
Yeah. So nothing's coming out. and Elton's just looking at me, and I was just like so embarrassed, and eventually I moved down to the right neck. But
Right.
after the show, he loved that. He just gave me so much shit. He said,
Oh, I
"Oh,
bet.
nice solo in standing. That was just great."
And it's like it's a pretty short one anyway. So,
Exactly. By the
the,
time I probably got the last two licks in it, So
do 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 do. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's a cool
and all the
little
people
solo.
standing in front of me are like, "Okay."
That won't happen twice though, right? Never
No,
again.
no.
Well, what were some of your favorite tunes besides the ones we mentioned that you like to play?
To play with Elton,
Yeah.
well, definitely "Bitches Back." That's and Saturday. Um, "Love Lies Bleeding," of course. Um, I liked, it's God. "Leave On" was fantastic because he would do like um, it would be kind of like a gospel thing. He'd go to double time, and that was great. I also had a solo in "Leave On," so that was
Mhm.
cool. Um, what else? God, all the songs are good. Even, I know the band would be really tired of playing Daniel, but I still love to play Daniel.
Sure.
It's just a beautiful song.
Did you guys
I
ever do Island Girl?
No, I used to sing that back in the day when I was in a cover band.
Yeah.
And that was a song that they were talking about maybe adding to the set list just after I was done with that last stint.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, come
I
on,
just love that
let's do
slide.
Island Girl."
Just that
I
brown,
know.
that's the hook, you know.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know. And the funny thing is that the lyrics are not very
Yeah,
PC,
it's
shall we say.
yeah, I was just
So
saying
everyone was going,
they haven't
of
aged
all
very well.
times, of all times to add that to the set list, why would
Yeah,
that be?
maybe not,
So,
maybe not, but
but of course, they've never, they haven't toured since I left. I don't think. No, maybe they have, but I didn't hear them do that song, so I don't know. I don't know
what
if they ever added it.
what studio albums were you on with Elton?
The Big Picture. Um, that's the only full studio album I did with him during that time.
Okay.
Um, I did cuts on there. He did a compilation called Love Songs,
Hmm.
and there was a couple of new tracks that he did for that, called "No Valentines" and "You Make History Young Again,"
Okay.
and then yeah, the whole of the Big Picture, and there was outtakes from that. Um, the live album, "One Night Only"
Hmm.
at Madison Square Gardens, um, and I played some tracks on Peachtree Road,
Okay. Yeah. I'm
on pedal
down here in
steel.
Atlanta, so I know Peachtree Road quite well.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
Quite well.
In fact, yeah, I came down there to record them actually. Yeah.
Cool. Um,
So,
so, what have you been doing musically lately, and where can folks go to hear your music?
um, yeah, good question. This past year, I've been actually remixing and remastering and transferring a lot of my old tapes from bands that from age of 16, 17 on, of so many different bands that I've been in, and the formats anywhere from a reel to reel 2-track, 8-track, 16-track, 24-track, DATs, ADATs, cassettes, Akai MG1212, all different kind of stuff. So that kept me really, really busy. And also, my wife had a book come out just before the pandemic, and she was planning to do book readings and signings and stuff like that. Of course, couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But what we've done over the past year is made an audiobook version of it,
Okay,
and
go
that
ahead.
was a new.
What's it called?
It's called Witch Hairs.
Okay, is it a
Witch Hairs.
fiction or is it?
It's actually a memoir.
No.
It's about her life, which is pretty darn interesting. I mean,
Okay.
she grew up in the South with a father that was a holistic doctor in times when that would be considered a warlock, basically. She
Okay.
grew up on an organic farm, and she worked in the music business. She was a Girl Friday for Paul McCartney at one point. Her husband before me was Jimmy Bowen, who was do you know that name?
I don't think so.
He produced Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and
Oh, okay.
Sammy Davis Jr. and Reba McEntire and Kenny Rogers, Glenn Campbell, big producer.
Okay.
Anyway, she was the first woman to run a publishing company in Nashville.
Oh.
So and she taught meditation in prisons and maximum security prison. So
Sounds like she's been ahead of the curve all along.
yeah, in a lot of unusual ways. Made a documentary on the Aboriginal artists in the outback of Australia. Seen things there that no non-Aboriginal has been.
Did she bring home any Aboriginal art to hang over the fireplace?
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of it's all over our house. Yeah. I love it. It's beautiful. Yeah.
And you have a website where people can hear some of the stuff you've done recently?
Sure. Or? Yeah. It's just johnjorgenson.com.
Okay.
And I'm also working on an artist app, where it'll be free to download, and all of my available music will be on there.
Okay.
So, and then I will also add a lot of this unreleased music that I've been, remixing. And like I, for example, I have the first demo of Highlander Boogie that I made, and I have a demo of Inspector Gadget, just to teach the other two guys the parts.
Okay. Very cool.
So I have unreleased Desert Rose Band stuff, live Desert Rose Band, just all kinds of stuff.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing some of that. Wanted to ask how Jerry and Ray are doing. I know Jerry had a stroke a while back. How is he?
Yeah, he had a pretty severe stroke, and he's not recovering from that. So he can't speak and he can't use his right side. Oh. So he's living in a care facility. That's pretty rough. Will lives in Asheville, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he wasn't touring too much anymore. He was just staying around home mostly.
He had a really cool column in one of my guitar magazines where he'd find these cheap guitars on eBay that were really, gems.
He still does that. I don't think he does the column anymore, but he still, trolls eBay, and he goes to swap meets, and he'll find unusual instruments.
How many guitars do you think he has at this point?
There was a whole room full last time. I mean, it was like a giant closet full of them, with it like a vault.
That's what I call mine, and it's just a closet. I call it the filing cabinet. You just kind of sift through, pick one out.
There was a lot. There was a lot in there. I don't even know how many.
How many do you think you have?
I really hate to say it's embarrassing. I don't know, but it might be up to 200.
Okay. Well, see, I don't feel so bad about my 20 to 30. I've kind of lost track.
Good.
People are always like, how many you got shot? I'm like, I don't know, a bunch.
Yeah.
Because then when I tell them, they're like, what in the world would you do with?
Why would you need that? I know.
It's like, well, they all sound different.
Yeah. Well, and for me, there's a bunch that are in England. There's a bunch in Scotland. There's some in Italy. There's a lot in Nashville. There's some here in California. And, so there you go.
What was your main axe with Elton?
Oh, I was like a fashion show. I played everything.
Everything.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I played that Hellecaster model. Yeah. I played the Silver Sparkle GNL. I have a Telecaster that's got the artwork for Goodbye Yellow Brick Road on the front of it.
Do you ever play Gibsons?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. Of course, for Saturday Nights All Right for Fighting, I would play a black Les Paul Custom, because that's what I saw Davey playing. And then, definitely. I used to love Les Paul Jr. I played Les Paul Jr. a lot. Uh,
Yeah, I saw you using that with
and
Desert Rose back in the day. Was that
yeah,
more of a
yeah.
Les Paul kind of gig, or did you mix it up
Uh,
too?
no, I mixed it up. Like I would be, Rickenbacker 12 string, Dan Electro 6 string bass, Telly, um, the Les Paul. I tried to be really colorful with my sounds, like Steve Howe. I
Sure.
try to have not like a different guitar for every song, but you know, I try to really, because I was the only guy that would really change tone colors out of that whole band.
Right.
So I felt like it was my job to keep it interesting tonally.
I would guess your tech was really on top of things. It has to be.
Well, I didn't have a tech in those days, but my Elton tech was
I
fantastic.
was gonna say,
Yeah,
yeah,
because I played, 12 string acoustic, 6 string acoustic, mandolin,
sure.
pedal steel,
It's
tenor
like
sax, soprano sax, a bunch of stuff.
I love the variety, but for me, it's kind of like I hate changing, I mean, but if somebody just brought me one ready to go, I'd probably be inclined to do it more often.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Well, it's fun. It's part of the show too. You're adding a little more visual appeal for
sure.
people. And for Elton, some songs need a Strat, and some songs need a Les Paul, and some need a double neck. So
Sure. We got it covered there. Excellent.
yeah.
Well, John, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap it up tonight?
Um, I'm just thinking. I'm looking forward to sharing all of this unreleased material, and I've got pictures of all my guitars and amps from when I was a kid. Really, I still have the hang tags from the Hofner guitar that I bought in 1971.
Awesome.
So I'm that kind of a crazy collector, and I'm looking forward to sharing those on my app. So um, hopefully that'll be in the next few months
The
that
app have
that'll
a
be able to come
name?
out.
Is it-
It's just going to be the John Jorgensen app. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
and it'll be free on the App Store. So there you go.
did anybody ever stop and point out that Elton John, Davy Johnstone, John Jorgensen, there's a lot of Johns kicking around that band?
Yeah, John. Yeah, and there was John Mahan. Yeah, and and a lot of Davies too. Davy Payton,
You're right, man.
Davy Johnston.
That's funny. That's very funny. Well, John, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've been a fan for so long, and it's just great to talk guitars with you for a couple hours. And
I sure
please,
enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. And
my
I,
pleasure,
you
my
know,
pleasure. And I'd love to have you back sometime. I'm working on some kind of round table kind of things where, you and a couple other guitarists get together and we kind of talk shop and that kind of jazz.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you know where to find me.
I do. I
So
do. It'd probably be, in the fall or something, but by the time I get around to that. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking about new angles for my show. I'm doing a few instructional ones as well, where we kind of break down the music of a certain band. We started with Steely Dan a few weeks ago, and
oh,
a
that's complicated.
local musical instructor, pianist friend of mine. We basically started at Do It Again and worked our way up to Babylon Sisters and to Deacon Blues and kind of talk
Nice.
about the evolution of their arranging and writing. By the time they got to Asia, it was like they were stringing chords together this long. Like Deacon Blues, there's like 50 chords in that thing.
I know it, and I would love to just see like a chart of guitar players and who played what
On
solo.
what? Well, I'll tell
You
you
know,
what, Walter Becker played more cool solos than people realize. I mean, like,
see, I wouldn't know because they're,
I'll tell you, like,
like on Katie Lied, it just says all these different guys.
oh, you're right.
You
Well,
know,
I
Rick
kind of,
Derringer, Lee Ritenour, blah, blah, it's like, well,
well, Derringer's on Chain Lightning, and Walter plays the solos on Black Friday and Bad Sneakers, which are two
okay,
awesome friggin' solos.
mhm.
And he also plays solo on Josie, which is Biggie from Asia. Um,
Yeah,
Haitian Divorce from Royal Scam. That's all.
yeah. Is
Um,
that him on the talk box?
yeah. And they added that after the fact, which blows my mind that they could get the phrasing to work and then add talk box later.
It's really bizarre.
Leave
Yeah,
it to
so
those
that's a strange way to do it.
I know. And so yeah, Walter, was hanging tough with those studio cats. He turned in some memorable solos along the way himself.
Well, I mean, they were another that I really, really liked. I really liked their earlier stuff, probably a little bit more than their most famous. You know,
Yeah, well, that original
it was
band they had for the first three albums, Skunk Baxter and Denny Diaz, you know,
yeah, yeah, that was
Skunk was like the, the utility guy almost. He was playing pedal steel and a bunch of other stuff too. And
yeah,
Denny Diaz
yeah,
was more the jazzy guy. And between the two of them, they really were a great team, I thought.
yeah. There's a super nice clip of them live playing "Reeling in the Years," and it's just as killer. You know, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
those harmony parts are just fantastic.
yeah, that was a whole education in itself, learning that music over there. I've
Oh
actually
yeah.
played some Steely tributes occasionally, like once or twice a year. And we've kind of like every year we do a whole album, from top to bottom. And we've worked our way through most of the catalog, and it's been kind of fun digging into some of those earlier ones and all those kind of
Oh man,
deep
that
tracks.
would be
Yeah,
yeah, that would be really fun. But I
with
think this is about it's
probably
making
about
a
ready
weird
to go.
sound that I don't know, so it's probably gonna
Yeah,
go any
I
second.
wanted to use the last bit of juice you had in there before we went, so I'll let you go. All righty, well,
All
stay
right.
safe, and I'll talk at you again sometime soon.
All right. Take
Thanks.
care. Thanks.
Take care. Have
Bye
a good
bye.
one.